good afternoon for the folks on the West Coast, and good night for people around the globe. Whatever you are, welcome to our second day of our Sales Reimagine, our 3-day Revenue Excellence Summit. My name is Eduardo. I am a community events manager at the amazing Modern Sales Pros, and I'll be your host for the next hour. And my job here is very easy. I just need to make sure everyone will get the most out of this experience. If you are not familiar with MSP, you are 100% missing out because Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer the toughest questions, revenue questions out there. And if you're not a member yet, you will be invited to join right after the summit, and I hope you will join, and I'll see you around in our great events in the future. This summit wouldn't be possible without our amazing sponsors, who you see on this slide right now. Kudos to them for making this happen. These amazing organizations are not only sponsoring this specific event, but the full 3 days of and 17 total events of the summit. You heard it right, 17 events. To learn more about these innovative companies, click on the sponsor booth tab on the top of this event page and check out all the ungated valuable resources that our sponsors have made available just for us this week. There might also be some surprises and some fun giveaways for you there. So I will make sure, if I were you, I'll make sure to check them out. You don't want to miss this out. Um, this week summit will be full of ways to completely reimagine sales. Whether you are in sales, marketing, customer success, or product, there will be content for you. We have the full agenda right now in the screen, and this is the first event of the second day of the summit. If you missed the first day, the recordings are available in the MSP website, and the recordings for today will also be. But this is the second day of the summit. This is the data-driven sales leader, how modern sales leaders weave data throughout their sales management motion. There's a full mouth of title. And if you want to see what we got going on the rest of the day and the week, visit the agenda tab at the top of this event page to see our full schedule of events. But let's focus on this session right now and how to get the most out of this. Here's our agenda for this session. I will go over some housekeeping notes and pass it to Pete so he can jump right into the amazing content he prepared. Um, but let me go through the housekeeping first. Before we jump into the content, I want to let you know that this session is being recorded and it will be available on our MSP website following the event. And second, familiarize yourself with GoCast, and if you have any questions for our speaker, please use the Q&A function on the right side of your screen so we can get to them. Also, this chat is wide open. We want to hear from you. So please do interact with each other. Tell us what did you think about the points being made in the presentation. Let us know whatever you want to share with us in the chat. Please use the chat. And lastly, go ahead and check out all our amazing speakers and sponsors by navigating to the tabs at the top of your screen. As I mentioned before, we are being joined by Pete Kazanji today. He has a amazing masterclass prepared for us. So I'm going to pass the mic to him and I'll be back at the end for some outro notes. But for now, let's have some fun. Let's hear from Pete. Pete, if you can join me in the stage now and start your masterclass, that would be amazing.
Hey everyone, good to see you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. I'm super pumped for the presentation today. Let's get this party started. I'm really enjoying the summit so far. Cool. So I'm Pete Kazanji. I'm one of the founders of Atrium, makers of data-driven sales management software, and I've been doing a little bit of emceeing here for the summit as well. But I'm super pumped on teaching this masterclass on data-driven sales leadership. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart, mainly because We talk a lot about data-driven sales management. So like helping the sales manager, this is something that Atrium talks about all the time, is like Atrium exists to help managers like AE, AM, SDR managers use metrics and data to improve rep performance. But there's also the second level and the third level leader as well that's a little distant from the day-to-day knife fighting of first level management. And so that's something that I care a lot about. And as you know, when we work with our hundreds of customers, that's something that VPs of sales and CROs and CEOs and founders come to us and say, hey, how can we best use data as a leader to infuse the organization? And like, A, how can I use it as a leader? B, how can I help the managers that I'm responsible for and I serve? How can I help them better use data? And then how can I use data and metrics to help with the reps as well? So that's this presentation that I put together here that I'm really excited to talk through here over the next little bit. Just for context, Atrium exists to help organizations attack these problems that we're going to be talking about today, to give those sales managers and sales leaders data-driven superpowers. So the things that we're going to cover today are why you should care about data and metrics as a second plus level leader. It's specifically the metrics and kind of data that you need and you should be paying attention to yourself, kind of like selfishly as a leader. Secondarily, how you should be thinking about this for your managers and supporting them, like the people that you're responsible for. And then lastly, what are the scenarios wherein you should be paying attention to rep level or potentially paying attention to rep level metrics for your organization? And so like we should probably be able to cover that in the next like 30 minutes or so. Who am I? Why should you care about things that I might have to say? My name is Pete Kazanji. I'm the co-founder and CRO at Atrium, makers of data-driven sales management software. But this isn't my first rodeo. My last software company, TalentBin, was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014, and that's really where I started learning about sales. Was in around 2010 or so, when I went from being a business generalist founder to our first seller, our first sales manager, and then eventually our sales leader, running a sales organization of 20 people before we were acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014, where I went to work on new product sales, right? Leading new product sales for a 1,000-person sales organization there. After that, I wrote a book on sales, on startup sales, called Founding Sales, and also started Modern Sales Pros. So I think a little bit about sales here or there. Before we kind of dive into the content here, one of the things that I want to offer people who are watching right now is we actually, Atrium sponsors a recurring boot camp with Richard Harris, a sales management boot camp. It's about a half-day session that sales managers, it's a sales management boot camp that sales managers can attend to kind of help them get better at sales management. It's not about data-driven sales management. It's about just like pure sales management topics, like how to run a good one-on-one, how to have like hard conversations, those sort of things. If you or any of your managers that report to you, you'd like to have them attend, you're more than welcome to do so. I think we're going to drop the sign-up link in the chat, but if you go to atriumhq.com/bootcamp, folks can sign up there. All we ask for in exchange is, so normally this would be like $1,000 for somebody to attend this boot camp. We're footing the bill. All we ask for in exchange is for folks to take a brief disco conversation with one of our team over here. So go ahead and sign up for that if you're interested, or have your manager sign up for that. We've had hundreds and hundreds of people attend it. They really, really like it. So it's cool. Wonderful. So why is it important to be a data-driven sales leader? Well, there's a couple of different reasons. So first and foremost, in a modern sales environment, data ends up being the eyes and ears of your organization. And this is something that's like fairly new in the last like 10 years or so. So 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we didn't have this data that people could use in order to understand like if their teams and their managers and their reps were engaging in the quantity and quality of selling behavior that was needed. Now we do. And so using it is extremely, extremely important because it's a source of advantage. And then moreover, not only should your organization do that, if you can do that at the managerial level and infuse that throughout the organization, what you can do is drive better situational awareness down at the manager level, right? Like at that very tactical level. So they're not missing anything and they can jump on issues before they become major problems. And so the reality is that making sure that your organization is data driven is really the future of modern sales management. And it's something kind of like one of the, I do a master class on Moneyball and sales. It always reminds me of the scene in Moneyball with Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill, where the the data driven coaches, the data driven managers are coming, and those who kind of manage by gut or manage by feel or what have you are definitely on their way out. It's kind of going the way of the dinosaurs there. And so obviously we want people to be as successful as possible and grow new data driven muscles, and that's really an important thing for the modern sales organization. So the three kind of big topics we're going to talk about here is metrics for the modern sales leader, the second level leader, the third level leader, and things that they should be paying attention to. Metrics for the managers they serve, so the things you should be thinking about systematizing for the managers that roll into you, and then metrics on the for kind of instrumenting and coaching the reps that you lead. Cool. So first things first, let's talk about metrics for leaders themselves. These are the things that like second level leaders should care about for themselves, right? Like these are kind of like oftentimes thought of as like strategic insights, things that they should be aware of, things that kind of go into their own operating rhythm. And so the kind of buckets that I kind of think about there is one, line of sight revenue there. Two, revenue next. So there's line of sight revenue that's like this quarter, maybe the beginning of next quarter. And then there's kind of coming down the pike, right? Like further out there. They should also be thinking about rep productivity or the fingerprint of success. We'll kind of get into that a little bit more here in a second. And then they should also think about alerting at the team level and kind of monitoring, changes on a team by team or organization level there. So let's go ahead and kind of pop into what this looks like there. So first, let's go ahead and talk about like line of sight revenue. These are sort of the table stakes things that leaders should be paying attention to there. Obviously, there's things like, bookings and wins are pretty straightforward there. But if you want to think about things that are a little bit more like leading indicators to that line of sight revenue, those would be things like, are you paying attention to the total new opportunities that are coming into the pipe of the aggregate organization, or the total amount of pipeline that your team is managing at a given point in time? So again, this is different than the forecast, like how much is, do we think is showing up this quarter or next quarter or what have you, but it's like the total amount of pipe that is in pipe right now, the total number of new ops that are flowing into flowing into that pipe to then be worked, et cetera. And so these are, pretty straightforward, like meat and potatoes metrics that you as a sales leader should be paying attention to the totals of. Moreover, there's then of course there's forecasting, which is pretty basic. A lot of people, rightfully so, pay attention to the forecast, but it's one of those things where it's like just looking at how much pipeline there is on a close date basis, so into the future. So, how much pipe is scheduled to close in July versus August versus September versus what have you, or looking at that on a rep by rep basis, like how much pipeline is remaining per rep. It's an important thing. It's still kind of like table stakes. The more advanced version of that might be something where you're looking at the more advanced version of that might be looking at things like the weighted pipeline, right? The win rate weighted pipeline for for the team, for those reps or what have you. So as an example, oftentimes organizations will look at like weighted pipeline using percentages on a stage by stage basis. A more advanced version of this, and this is something that's baked into Atrium, looks at the weighted pipeline based on historical win rates from the stages that each of those ops are in. And so this would be an example of a more data-driven way of doing forecasting by saying, hey, I get that you say that there's this amount of pipe that's scheduled to close this quarter or next quarter. Let's go ahead and discount that by the historical win rate for each of those stages, right? And apply that to the pipeline value. And what that can do is that can give you a much better line of sight onto what your actual forecast might be than saying, hey, you know what, we want to have this amount of pipeline coverage, or alternatively saying, hey, you know what, we're going to use these made up averages there. Made up percentages. Another example of this as well that can be very helpful is like a pipeline waterfall. It's going to say like, hey, you know what, we started the quarter with this amount of pipeline right here. Here's what's happened. You know, this is how much that is new. This is how much is closed won. And then here's what's pushed out and what's closed lost. And here's how much is left behind. All of these things I think of as like very helpful leadership metrics and data for line of sight revenue. Now, an even better version of this would be things where we could have alerting around whether or not, having alerting around those metrics. And so an example here would be, this is an alert from a customer Atrium instance here that shows you alerting on changes in those metrics based on, in this case, a historical deterioration in pipeline ownership there. So taking revenue, like line of sight revenue metrics, and then having alerting on it in order to help you understand, oh, okay, like we have a degradation in pipeline ownership, or we have less forward pipeline than we traditionally have, can be something that a second level leader can be really helpful for a second level leader to get ahead of a potential problem and say, oh, do we need to change our behavior? Do we need to change our marketing behavior, our sales behavior, what have you, in order to kind of help kind of get ahead of this? Cool. So then what we want to think about is, we were just talking about forecasting, we're talking about line of sight revenue. Okay, well, where does revenue next come from, right? Like what goes into the forecast? And that can be things like, how is our pipeline progressing in the sales organization? How are our AEs doing with respect to progressing those opportunities in that pipe? And then moreover, even upstream from that, what's happening in marketing land, what's happening in SDR land, they can help us to understand what's going to show up in AE pipelines to then be worked and eventually closed. And so this is why things like new opportunity ownership or total opportunity creation by the SDR function, or at the very, very top of the funnel for AEs, or the kind of the pipeline version of that, can be very helpful for thinking about that next revenue, like what's going to show up. Not like it hasn't even been piped yet, right? It's actually pushed out a little bit further, but we still need to pay attention to that to make sure we're not going to get caught flat-footed there. An even more sophisticated version of that, and this is something that's kind of unique to Atrium, is looking at the amount of pipeline that has reached a certain stage, right? So it's all well and good for us to say, hey, here's the amount of pipeline that we have in, that has been created. Well, okay, but how much has reached stage 1? Or alternatively, how much has reached stage 2? And so these things can be hard questions for somebody to answer using traditional kind of Salesforce reporting. If instead you can say, hey, I know that the amount of pipeline that is reaching Disco Plus, or getting to needs analysis, or getting to proposal, is this right here, and this is how it compares to what it's been in the past. That can be something that's very powerful as a sales leader to understand what the potential next revenue is, even if that stuff isn't forecast yet, right? Knowing how much pipe has gotten to stage 2 or stage 1, stage 2, or stage 3 can be very powerful for understanding where it's going to, what our future what our future revenue might look like. And then moreover, this makes it all the way back to SDR focused metrics. And so as a sales leader or an SDR leader, these are things that you should both be paying attention to. Understanding how many accounts are being interacted with, in total for the SDR team, and then not just how many total accounts are being interacted with, but also how many new accounts, right? How much new account inflow is happening with the SDR team will help you understand how much opportunity is going to be showing up 2 weeks out, 4 weeks out, 6 weeks out, 8 weeks out, 12 weeks out, right? Because the number of accounts that SDRs are interacting with, and then moreover, the number of new accounts that are coming into their pipes, like to be acted on, once those have been acted upon, like matured, gone through the relevant cadences and sequences and what have you, will drive opportunity creation 2, 4, 6, 8, 12 weeks down the road there. And then if you want to get really, really leading indicator there, you can also look at things like email responsiveness rates or connect rates on those SDR teams, because that'll help you understand, like, okay, this is the number of accounts that the SDR team is interacting with. They're doing a good job. Okay. And moreover, the people are, our prospects are responding to them in a way that they have historically in the past. That would lead us to believe that we should probably have the same amount of opportunity creation showing up in the future as we have had in the past there. And so these are all the sort of metrics that you would want to pay attention to from a revenue next standpoint. Again, the revenue that's like a little bit further out from the from that immediate like line of sight revenue that you're paying attention to. Great. So we've talked about line of sight revenue, like this quarter, maybe beginning of next. We've talked about revenue next, so the stuff that's like a little bit further out. Want to make sure that we're doing a good job building it. What about what we like to call fingerprint of success? And so what this is something where instead of paying attention to totals, what we're looking at here is how are our reps doing individually on an average basis, not just an average basis, but also on a rep by rep basis in a way that then kind of allows our managers to make judgments about those reps. And so I'll kind of take you guys through what this kind of looks like in practice. And so when you think about a fingerprint of success for a successful account executive or an SDR or what have you, what it comes down to is expected levels of in their metrics. And so probably the best example of this would be opportunity ownership, right? Or like new opportunity ownership. And how many ops are in their pipe right now. And so what you can see here is like, this is a metrics card on the left side here, kind of showing the total number of opportunities that are in the AE's pipes on average, not total, on average. And so what you can do is you can say, hey, we have an expectation that our account executives, you can kind of see that this customer has this right here. We have an expectation that our account executives have anywhere between like 20 and 40 ops that are in their pipe, right? And so this is the problem with like totals, is it can hide those averages. So you can add, especially in an environment where efficiency is king, we don't want to add more and more and more reps and then have our total go up just a little bit. We want everyone to continue, like we want our individual reps to be highly efficient and highly, and effectively loaded. And so by looking at that average there, you can say, hey, you know what? Our reps have the right number of total opportunity in their pipeline. And like that's like the trend on that is appropriate. And if it's not, we can engage and do something about it. And if it's fine, we can be fine. Moreover, what we can do is when we look at this, like the fingerprint of success and the average for the team is one thing. Then, and this is something that's probably more of like a manager thing versus a second level leader thing, what we would want to understand is how does that look on a rep by rep basis. So in this case, we can see that our rep, like this customer's like number of ops that are in their pipe is like right around 29, like right between, like right there, right? But right where it should be. But if you look at these reps here, you can see there's actually some substantial variation in there. Like these two up here have a lot more opportunities in pipe than their peers. And then we can see that these folks down here, this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one, well, they're all like under where we would expect them, we would want them to be. And so having this fingerprint of success crossed with the actual totals for those individual reps ends up being very powerful, because now what we can do is, like, one, we can see how the team is doing, how the team in aggregate is performing, but then also see where the individual issues are, so we can jump on that. Like if we just declared victory right here and said, okay, everything's hunky-dory, well, that'll actually be us being a bad manager, because it turns out that it actually looks like we have a number of reps that do need, probably anywhere between like 5 to 10 more opportunities in their pipe. And in so doing, that would raise this average. But if we just said, hey, everything's cool because, we're right here in the middle, we would be losing out on the fact, we'd be missing out on the fact that we have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 reps here that whose pipe or whose op ownership is suboptimal. Right. And so this is the important thing, is like, you can't just look at totals. You can't just look at averages. You have to look at the individuals as well. And we'll talk about that a little bit here in a second in the manager section. And the same is true with, so we're looking at, opportunity ownership here. But the same is true across like any other metrics, right? Well, like whether you're talking about win rate, or you're talking about customer facing meeting volume, or you're talking about like average selling price, the same stuff kind of applies there, where what we would want to do is have like a fingerprint of success for the kind of the key metrics that matter for the team, set a line for what we would expect that to be, and then moreover, go ahead and compare that to where that's at on a rep by rep basis there. Cool. So that was fingerprint of success. And so the last thing we're going to talk about here as relates to sales leaders and kind of like the metrics that they themselves should kind of like selfishly, personally be paying attention to, separate as kind of distinct from what the managers that they serve should be paying attention to, will be what we call team level alerts. And so what these are is things that managers should be things that leaders should be paying attention to when there's kind of like changes in the organization. And so like a good example of this would be these team level alerts. We kind of talked about one earlier on like pipeline change. That might be kind of key movements in organization-wide metrics. So in this case, like this is an example of an alert that's going off for an organization where it's like, hey, look, the average selling price for across the entire account executive team is ramping up here, right? It's 20% higher than it has been previously. That's, maybe that's a good thing. Did you have an initiative around avoiding discounting? And then moreover, kind of the example we saw before, is there, a deterioration in pipeline ownership, or is there a deterioration in account engagement and what have you? Or, by contrast, is the number of customer-facing meetings popping up there in a substantial way? And so, like, these are things, even though as a second-level leader, it's not really your job to pay attention to things at a rep level. Instead, it's not really your job to pay attention to things at a rep level. That's what your managers are there for, and that's what you're responsible for enabling those managers. But when there are changes in the entire team, that's definitely something that you want to be aware of there. And then lastly, a really good example here would be like paying it like board meetings and QBR. So being able to kind of pay attention to key like org level metrics and calling those out to the organization can be very powerful there. Wonderful. So that was kind of stuff for the sales leader. Now we're going to talk about the managers that they're responsible for. And so the thing is that when you're a leader, it's not dissimilar to the rep going from being an AE to a manager, where you have to get out of the business of doing the thing that worked before. Like, I'm going to close deals, I'm going to close deals. And instead, I'm going to manage the person. And when you go from being a manager to being a leader, it's kind of a similar situation. Like, you're not managing the reps anymore. You're enabling the managers who are they're managing the reps, or they should be, right? They should be managing the deals. They're managing the reps. And what you need to be doing is providing them the operating rhythm and the harness and the analytics and the process and what have you, to manage their teams. And so that's what we're going to talk about right here is how do you serve the managers that you're responsible for, and as a result, what are the key metrics and assets and kind of that they need in order to be successful, that you as a second level leader are responsible for delivering to them. And so this is something that we think about quite a bit at Atrium, because we have a pretty straightforward point of view that sales managers are extraordinarily important in organizations, because they are that kind of like first line of support there, and they really are the difference between organizations that are highly successful and those that are not. Highly successful managers drive all sorts of positive benefits in an organization. And so the challenge, of course, is that being great at sales management actually requires a bunch of different capabilities. Yes, folks should be doing deal inspection and strategy. Usually managers don't have a problem doing that because they come from being a sales rep, who have gotten very good at that over time. But instead, what they should be doing is paying attention to tracking progress towards goals. They should be bringing data into their one-on-ones. They should be monitoring the ramp of new hires. They should be identifying issues and fixing them, right? Getting on top of issues before they become serious problems, and resolving them. And then moreover, what they should be doing is paying attention to the success of top performers and then standardizing that across the rest of the team. Right, so these are the things that managers should be doing, and conveniently, these can be done more effectively using data and metrics. The problem, of course, is that we don't really do our managers many favors when it comes to enabling them for this. So first, usually manager enablement is really kind of like at the back of the bus when it comes to prioritization. Most kind of modern sales technology focuses either on the forecast instead of on how to improve it. Usually enablement resources go to reps as opposed to managers, and then managers themselves are often newly promoted individual contributors, and then moreover, metrics analysis is not kind of an organically acquired skill there. And then lastly, or secondarily, when you think about the tools that we provide our leaders, our managers, in order to manage by data, it ends up being really kind of horizontal tooling that is focused on, that is really for analysts, right? So whether it's like tons and tons of dashboarding or BI or what have you. And so this is actually really important, because if you think about tough economic environments and what have you, sales management becomes all the more important here, where efficiency ends up being really important, making sure that reps are at a good win rate, that reps are attaining appropriately, that they're ramping effectively, and that they're and then moreover, they're doing a great job with respect to pipe management, ends up being extraordinarily important. The problem is that without this sort of enablement here, oftentimes what managers end up doing is they just kind of fall back to that same old of saying, hey, you know what, let's talk about deals, let's talk about deals. And so what our claim would be is that instead what those folks should be doing is they should be enabled with purpose-made tooling that helps them use data to drive, to manage effectively, which would mean things like every single KPI that they could possibly want for that AE team, for that SDR team, but then moreover, not just every KPI you could want out of the box, but also the monitoring of all those KPIs. So tracking progress towards goals, alerting on potential issues before they become problems, and then doing root cause analysis on those reps. And so the reason why using data is extremely important in doing these things up here is because it's the only way for managers to really get good leverage. and good leverage on their time. And so the mechanism by which this happens is, like, if you look at the traditional mechanism by which folks would try to do this, is it would be like riding along with their reps. And so the problem, of course, with that is like, hey, are you on the right call? Did you like miss something, et cetera? Moreover, if you are in a remote environment, like a lot of us are right now, the ability to kind of instrument via osmosis by sitting on the sales floor, kind of like listening, half listening to a variety of calls is really negatively impacted there. Moreover, if you want to like listen live to calls, sorry, not live, but if you want to listen to calls after the fact, that ends up like listening to hours and hours of calls ends up being very low leverage. The only thing that's lower leverage than that would actually be closing the deals for your reps. And so so by using data, what you can do is you can lever up and make sure that you're focusing in on the areas that actually need attention. So figuring out where the hitch is in a rep's sales motion and then listening to those calls. Or it might not even be a call-based thing, like looking at the metrics associated with a rep and saying, hey, you know what, this isn't a call execution problem. This is a pipeline management problem or a pipeline hygiene problem, as indicated by all these untouched ops and all the like this bad pipe hygiene right here. Great, let's fix that problem. I would have never identified that riding along on a call or listening to other calls. It just turns out that this rep has poor pipeline hygiene because they have poor calendar management. Or it might just be an activity issue. Hey, this rep just isn't doing enough customer-facing activity, customer-facing meetings, they're not doing the prospecting, et cetera. Again, not something you would pick up on calls, something you would pick up in kind of the metrics associated with a rep. So, okay, if you believe that this is the case and that managers should be paying attention using data to manage their teams, this is something that we believe very vociferously. What's the right way of doing that? Okay, and so the mechanism by which to do that is one, you have to have a data-driven operating rhythm. And so typically what that means is making sure that you have a good rhythm of composed of various meetings at an appropriate frequency that has the right content in them in order to drive awareness and action based on that. And so these are some examples of operating rhythms that you might have: a pipeline review meeting, a one-on-one, that is distinct from pipeline review, right? QBRs, call reviews, et cetera. And so the important thing here is that these meetings don't just have a frequency, but they also have specific content that is important for them. So a one-on-one meeting would not be about deal reviews. It's instead about paying attention to metrics and seeing progress on coaching initiatives as identified by those metrics. This is different than a pipeline review meeting or a deal strategy meeting where we're going to talk about deals. We're going to talk about deal strategy. We're going to say, hey, what's the issue with this one? Why is it getting hung up? Et cetera, right? So this is kind of like, these are some examples of what what an operating rhythm might look like there. And then if you think about how that operating rhythm is then spread across a month or a quarter or what have you, this is kind of an example of what that might look like. So we've got our days of the week: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We got our different weeks here. And so you can kind of see how these these meetings right here are spread out across an operating rhythm right here. So as an example here, we might have a daily stand-up on each day, right, to kind of like, set the agenda, report out on some basic metrics, et cetera. This is different than our sales team meeting that happens on a Monday. This is different than our team pipeline review that happens on a Wednesday. This is different than our one-on-ones with distinct team members, as kind of noted here, that we have on a Thursday. And so making sure that you have these things on the calendar in order to review the relevant assets and drive the relevant outcomes is the key to having a operationally excellent and data-driven organization. Because if it's just kind of like 6-year-olds playing soccer, kind of like running over here, running over here, running over here, running over here, as opposed to a well-harnessed operating rhythm, you're going to see a very substantial difference between your performance there. Probably the best way of of ensuring that managers are managing with data is to instill a culture of data-driven one-on-ones. And what that means is, and again, this is distinct from a pipeline review. And importantly, like I advocate actually people breaking them apart, because if you have a pipeline review, it's like if you say, oh, well, we're going to have an hour together, and part of it will be this, and part of it will be this. Invariably, because managers are so prone to work at the bottom of the funnel, kind of like closest to the money, the kind of pipeline review or the deal strategy will end up consuming the totality of that time. And so I like to say, we say in our organization, the calendar is destiny. And so if you don't have that broken apart and a specific time for a data-driven one-on-one, it's highly unlikely that it's going to happen. And so this is an example of what that looks like in practice here. I think maybe we can drop a link to this template here. This is a data-driven one-on-one agenda in Google Doc here, where importantly what we're doing is we're linking to a bunch of resources there, like maybe it's a dashboard that's focused on whatever the improvement areas might be for that rep, or maybe it's like a team-based one for like, hey, here's where we're at, like here's what happened last week, here's where we're at for the month. And then it might be a separate one that it's like bespoke to that rep, like, hey, these are the things we're working on pipeline hygiene with you right now. We have a card in this dashboard on the number of untouched opportunities that are in your pipe right now. And then moreover, we have a card next to it that's looking at how many untouched opportunities somebody has had over time there. But importantly, like data-driven one-on-ones are really the fundamental unit of great management, great sales management. And so if you had to choose one of these outside of pipeline review to add, it really would be having a great, like a well-cadenced and well agendized data-driven one-on-one there. The last thing we'll kind of talk about here in metrics for your managers is goal setting, because this ends up being like setting goals and then tracking progress towards them ends up being a really important and really powerful way for managers to have their arms around their reps. And so the challenge with this is that there's kind of two things that trip people up. One is they don't do a great job of like setting goals around those metrics, or selecting those metrics. And when you do that, when you select some good metrics to put goals around, and then moreover you set appropriate goals that are attainable and justifiable, and then track progress towards them, really amazing things start happening. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about what that looks like in practice here. So when it comes to setting your goals, you kind of want to blend together three approaches. One, using historical performance of your teams. Two, doing a bottoms-up approach where you think about how much of a given thing the person should be doing, how many customer-facing meetings, how much email should they be doing, how much how many new opportunities should be coming into their pipe, how many ops should they have at a given point in time, kind of like that fingerprint of success that we were talking about above here. Setting those goals and saying, from a bottoms-up standpoint can be very important. And then lastly, you can use benchmarks. So looking at, if you can get access to this sort of data, this is something that the Atrium customer success team does for our customers, is looking at across our 300 customers and saying, oh, okay, cool, you have a sales motion that looks like these 30 customers over here. This is the number of customer-facing on an anonymized basis, this is like customer-facing meeting volume or opportunity ownership volume or what have you. And so none of these in isolation is going to be something that's going to be sufficient for the organization. Instead, what you want to do is kind of like take them and then blend them together. And then for the most part, it'll probably be blending these two together right here, historical performance and bottoms-up behavior. And then lastly, what you really want to do is make sure that you publish this information out. So folks, you should be able to point at a rep and say, yo, how many customer-facing meetings are you supposed to be having on a weekly basis? Oh, 10, 15 if I'm really sweating. Great, good job. Hey, Mr. SDR, how many customer-facing emails are you supposed to be sending a week? And how many new contacts are you supposed to be touching a day? I'm supposed to be touching 50 new contacts a day for, and in aggregate, I should be sending 500 customer facing emails in a week. That's how you'll know that you've got a good goal harness in place, is that when people can just like rattle off the goals that they should be hitting. And so kind of some examples of what this looks like in practice here. These are some suggested goals for for AE metrics. Some of them are pretty straightforward and kind of like banded, like customer facing meetings or emails or unique accounts touched. Here, this is really more related not to the sales motion of the organization, but instead to how many hours there are in the day or hours there are in the week here. So you can see, anywhere between like 7 to 15 customer facing meetings in a week. If you're having more than like 20, it's probably going to be a little hairy there. Moreover, and then when you get up to more kind of sales motion dependent metrics like the win rate, or the amount of multi-threading, like you can imagine in a SMB motion, the number of contacts you should be engaging on a per account or per op basis might be pretty low. If you get up into like a very serious enterprise sale, ideally you're interacting with like 5, 7, 10 contacts here. Again, very highly motion dependent. And the same is true kind of with SDR land. A little bit less variation here because, again, most of this is kind of contingent on the number of hours in a day or kind of hours in a week there. But there will be things that are going to be more motion dependent, like email response rates, or the number of activities that it takes in order to create an op might vary kind of based on how hard it is to get into contact with the relevant targets, or like how noisy their inboxes or their voicemail is, et cetera, et cetera. But the important thing is to select these metrics and then make sure that you actually are setting goals on it. Because if you do that and then embed that into that operating rhythm of data-driven one-on-ones, you'll get ahead of issues before they become problems. You'll catch this SDR here on Wednesday where he or she is dramatically behind pace for the week, or you'll catch this account executive. In week 2, or like week 1 or week 2 or week 3 of the quarter, where their new opportunity inflow is off as compared to their peers, right? Cool. So last kind of section here is on data-driven sales leaders and where are the appropriate points where you should be paying attention to the reps that you're responsible for. And so this is kind of tough because as a leader, you should be working through your managers. You shouldn't be paying attention to the reps, because that's the job of your managers, right? They're the ones who have the direct managerial relationship. Now, that said, there are some scenarios wherein backing your managers up and paying attention to that, paying attention to rep level metrics can be really important. And specifically what those are is around ramping, which is obviously a very important kind of point in time for folks, for reps, specifically around key initiatives where there might be something that your organization is paying attention to in particular. And then lastly, what we at Atrium like to call strategy insights. And this is like where there's kind of certain root causes, either problematic or beneficial, that need to be paid attention to on a rep basis. Cool. So let's talk about ramping. So ramping ends up being an extremely, extremely important point in time, and we have a masterclass on data-driven ramping that maybe we can drop a link to here. But importantly, it's because you've got this situation where your reps, like, they haven't started producing bookings yet for maybe 3 months, 6 months, who knows, maybe 9 months. And so as a result, paying attention to leading indicators there ends up being really important. And so understanding that your newly hired reps are coming into band with prior cohorts of reps ends up being a very, very important thing, because you don't want to get to month 4, month 5, month 6, month 7 and saying, oh man, like where are the bookings? You want to catch that earlier on, right? And so paying attention to earlier on where you can intervene. Understand in month 2 that somebody is far behind with respect to opportunity ownership. Right? Or they're maybe not far behind with respect to opportunity ownership, but their opportunity progressions aren't where they need to be. Like they're having a hard time getting things out of stage 2. And so this is some examples, some positive examples here around alerting with respect to ramping. So as you can see right here, this rep right here is highly outperforming with respect to the number of wins as compared to his peers. Historically, this rep right here has a substantially higher, same rep has a substantially higher win rate as compared to their peers in ramp there. This would be a really powerful thing for us to be able to understand, oh wow, this person's ramping extremely well. What are they doing that's different than the other reps, such that I can then standardize on this going forward, right? And the converse can also be true. If somebody is under where they need to be from a metric standpoint, saying, hey, this person has dramatically fewer opportunities than a typical ramping employee, we need to prioritize filling their pipeline with ops, or we're going to have a problem in 2, 3, 4 months from now, right? Or on the flip side, wow, this rep is doing a really great job from a new opportunity inflow standpoint. What's the deal there? Can we standardize that across other folks there? So that's ramping. The next thing is that paying attention to key initiatives. Right? Is there something that your organization has a key initiative around? It might be something like, hey, you know what? We need to get our reps more efficient, or sorry, we need to get to our cost of sales more efficient. We need to have our account executives prospecting more because we've had to dial back our SDR to AE ratio. So what that might look like is, are we doing a good job with respect to our prospecting outbound? Are we doing a good job with our account executive self-sourced ops? All of these would be things, because it's a key initiative, it's worth us as a second level leader or a third level leader focusing in on that and saying, hey, here's the situation there, right? Like this individual is outperforming with respect to this specific initiative, or this individual over here is underperforming with respect to this key initiative over here. And then lastly, what I want to touch on here is what we call strategy insights here at Atrium, but it's essentially understanding the root cause of like a pattern of behavior that is either problematic for a rep and we could intervene and fix, or really positive for a rep that we could potentially standardize across the rest of the team. And so this is the sort of analysis that oftentimes can be tougher for a line level manager without specific help. But it ends up being really important for a second level leader. It's important for the line level managers as well, but it can be really important for a second level leader to say, here's an issue. This rep is going to have a problem. I need to jump on this with you in partnership, Mr. Manager and or Ms. Manager, and make sure that we're going to deal with this. So, some examples here. This is out of a anonymized customer, Atrium customer instance. You can see this rep right here has 50% lower bookings in the trailing 90 days as compared to his peers. And really, what it's kind of coming from is that he's got a lower win rate and a lower ASP. And then moreover, his conversion rate out of a specific stage, in this case, contract out, is what's driving that lower win rate. We'll kind of show you a little bit more of this in a second. By contrast, you have this other rep who has 30% more bookings in the trailing 90 days than his peers. And what it looks like it's coming from is it's not coming from a higher win rate. It's really just coming from the fact that this rep has a much faster deal cycle, and that is being, and then moreover, driving a higher ASP. And so being able to kind of see what that looks like and say, hey, look, this rep right here, he's got 50% less bookings, and it really looks like it's coming from this lower win rate, which is being driven by an underperforming conversion rate out of contract out. Let's go ahead and let's attack that as a manager, as a leader. Hey, this rep looks like he's putting stuff out into contract before it's ready to go. And no wonder like that's going to mess up our forecast in a really meaningful way. We got to fix this right here in order to fix his sales motion, or else this is going to be a path. This pathology is going to impact all of his opportunities that he's working right now. Or by contrast, what we can see is that this rep right here has a substantially higher win rate as compared to his peers, and that's driving more bookings. What's this rep doing? Like, he has the same number of ops, he's got the same ASP, he's got the same deal cycle. What is this rep doing that's driving this higher win rate? Because if we can take that and we can systematize that across the rest of the team, we're going to be in a really great spot across. And so this is the sort of thing that, yeah, we would want our managers to be able to pay attention to here and like drive insight on, or sorry, drive action off of these insights. But sometimes the reality is that as a leader, you're going to have to jump in and see situations like this and partner with your managers to say, hey, let's fix this right here. Let's partner together and fix this so this rep isn't problematic. Or conversely, wow, this rep right here is really hitting the cover off the ball. How can we make everybody else on your team this successful, Mr. Manager? But moreover, how can we make the other 6 reps on this team, the other 10 reps on this team, the other 10 reps on this team? How can we change our sales motion to systematize what this individual is doing right here? Because he seems to have like a secret that we could, if we could apply that secret to the rest of the team, we'd be in a really amazing spot. So that's all I got for you guys today. That's data-driven sales leadership. Again, the 3 things that we covered here was specifically metrics for you as a sales leader, things that you should be paying attention to for yourself, you know, in the board meeting, in QBRs, et cetera, for line of sight revenue, revenue next, et cetera. We also covered how to enable your managers, which is really important. And then also, what are the situations wherein it's worthwhile and important for you to potentially pay attention to rep level metrics. So thanks for that. Don't forget, if you want to have your sales managers or even yourself attend our sales management bootcamp with Richard Harris here, go ahead and hit that hyperlink or go to atriumhq.com/bootcamp. Again, it's a half-day sales management bootcamp that is focused on the fundamentals of sales management. It's not focused on data-driven sales management. It's focused on how to be a great manager around things like how to have effective one-on-ones, which will involve data, how to have hard conversations, how to have good coaching conversations with your reps, how to have a good operating rhythm, so on and so forth. So thanks everybody for taking the time to join us today, and enjoy the rest of the summit.
Hi, Pete. Thank you very much. This masterclass was amazing. I see in the chat right here, people are just raving because this was really great. If you enjoyed this experience today, stick around because Pete will be back with other superstar CEOs, COOs, CROs, and much more. And next up, oh, let me just change my slide over here. Pete will be talking with Kelly Wright, the president and COO of Gong, and this is gonna be amazing. So I'm gonna put a link in the chat right now so you can send to your friends and say like, hey, I just watched Pete's masterclass and it was great, and he will be back in 1 hour and you should join. Just send them this link and they will be able to join the masterclass, the fireside chat, sorry, today at 11 a.m. Pacific time. Join us and stay tuned for more stuff coming up your way because this summit is not done yet. There are so many great things coming up. Thank you very much for joining us now. I'll see you in a